Thousands of Cuban refugees are expected to make it through the Texas-Mexico border this month.
Some are already starting to trickle into the valley. CBS 4's Nestor Mato is here to tell us why Cubans are making the long journey through Latin America. Nestor.
Well, Cuba is just 90 miles away from Florida. That's closer than Corpus Christi or Laredo is to us. But instead, Cuban refugees are choosing to make the long journey through South and Central America, then to Mexico, crossing the Texas border.
Filiberto Pereira says he was a pastor in Cuba who was persecuted.
Because the Christian, we consider the Christians the puppets of the Yankees.
And forced to work in what he calls concentration camps.
I was not accepting the ideology of the communist system, and I was suffering so much in the concentration camp for years.
Pereira says over 7,000 Cubans are also trying to escape to the United States through Mexico, but were stranded in Central America. Now arrangements have been made to get them to Laredo, one group arriving just last month. Pereira, who opened a church in Los Fresnos, says he has helped shelter and feed thousands of Cuban refugees over the last 20 years.
Receive call sometimes from officers on the port of entrance to pick up people, or bus stations and several different places.
Those Cubans choosing to avoid the trip to Florida because of heavy Coast Guard patrol. Through the wet foot, dry foot policy, Cubans caught on water are sent back, but those who reach land are allowed to stay. Cubans are allowed to stay in the United States if they make it because they are considered to be seeking political asylum. They are allowed to apply for permanent residency after 1 year. Pereira says the most recent Cuban crisis began when Nicaragua, an ally to the Castros, began to deny entry to Cubans seeking to escape the oppression of the communist country. Cubans who are allowed to fly to Ecuador on tourist visas would book flights with the intention of leaving towards the United States. With Nicaragua closing their borders, countries were overflowing with migrants. 5 Central American countries and Mexico then agreed to allow passage for the refugees.
If they pay $300 or something like that, then we can work something out to where they're going to be able to get out of here and arrive in Mexico and get into the United States.
Rogelio Núñez of Casa de Proyecto Libertad says Cubans who paid for the trip were broken into groups and allowed to fly from Costa Rica to El Salvador and then taken by bus to Mexico, granted 20-day visas, and bused to Laredo. Núñez says not every Cuban has made that path. Others have made their own dangerous journey on their own or with the help of smugglers taken through Central and South America. For those who make it to Mexico, they're given the same 20-day visas to make it to the U.S. on their own. Rogelio says those refugees come through different parts of the valley. Pereira says over the last week, dozens have passed through the Matamoros Bridge to Brownsville. He says besides several more planned arrivals of Cubans in Laredo, he expects hundreds more to come through Hidalgo and Cameron counties.
And you come to the bridge, you are in what they call dry foot. That means that you have the right to be asking the protection of the United States.
The number of Cuban migrants to the United States has spiked after the announcement of the U.S.-Cuban relations that they were mending. Now, many Cubans are afraid they would lose the political privilege that allows them to seek refuge in the U.S., and that's why they made the trip. In the studio, Nestor Mato, CBS 4 News and ValleyCentral.com.